think all of us have experienced this, right? It's challenging to feel like you're engaging your students because we're all on these screens. And, as often happens in these kinds of meetings, you have a bunch of people there, but some of them are just blank screens with their cameras off. And sometimes they're not showing up to meetings and stuff. I found that one of the most important things from my perspective is clear communication. And that is not always the easiest and most straightforward thing to come up with. How do you make sure that your students are getting the information that you want to put out there? And I've struggled with that, to be perfectly honest. You post an announcement on iCollege and you don't know who's seeing it. You send emails and you're not sure if those emails are getting read. But the way that I've tried to do this as much as I can is make myself available and give them as much information, especially early on, as I can. And this may be something that comes up later on in our discussion, but I've tried to use iCollege as much as possible to keep it all in one place and not email. I just keep everything within iCollege. I ask my students to email me outside of iCollege for reasons I can explain later, but inside of iCollege, I try to make announcements on a regular basis. And I let my students know that I'm available for them. And that's been really helpful, is to let them know that they can reach out directly to me, but then I give them clear instructions in regular announcements. I make announcements probably like 3 to 4 times a week in each of my classes to try to give them a digest of information. And that's been helpful for me so far.
That's great, Matthew. Deirdre, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, everything that Matthew has said, except for I also have my classes use PackBack, which is outside of iCollege. It's a discussion group platform, with artificial intelligence. So it takes some of the moderation responsibilities out of the instructor's hands. So it's sort of more time efficient. Other than that, I guess the other thing I'll say is I give students my cell phone number. They can text me, they can call me, they can email me. They don't overuse it or anything like that, but some prefer to call. And also, if I'm confused about what they want, I will ask them. I say, can we just talk on the phone about this? And normally they are fine with that. So there's that. The next thing is really briefly, this semester I'm teaching or co-teaching a new course, COVID-19 and Systemic Racism, with one of our PhD graduate students, Tyler McCoy-Gay, and he helped develop it with me. And one of the ideas he had that I never would have thought of is, well, why don't we do the course material instead of these voiceover PowerPoints? Why don't we do it as a podcast? And we can have people come in and interview people. We can do lectures on it, et cetera, et cetera. And I know this is early on in the semester, but so far it's actually working. I think they find it much more, it's still asynchronous. My classes are self-paced, asynchronous. And then, well, Mindy will probably discuss the next thing. But anyway, just being able to see your faces and, Tyler and I are interacting in some of them, or we're interviewing other people in other ones, that we've gotten a number of students contacting us saying, wow, this is great. So it's easy to do. We do it on Zoom. So, and you can do it on WebEx. So that's all.
That's helpful, Deirdre. And there's in the chat, we've got the spelling for PackBack. It's in there if you're looking for it. Mindy, we're going to turn to asynchronous in a minute, but other strategies for keeping students engaged that you want to mention?
Well, my experience is only with asynchronous online instruction, but I don't think that, I think that you can engage in the same way whether you're teaching asynchronously or not. I've kind of pulled with some of the same tools I used when I was only teaching face-to-face, and I work really hard to make the material, the presentations themselves, even more engaging and more examples and anything that I can do to make the material and the presentations engaging for students. But one of the things, and I certainly do what Matthew was saying about more clarity and more organization than ever before, and more reminders, automated reminders, in fact, than I would ever have given face-to-face. But I've also found that teaching asynchronously is a little alienating, and I have scheduled kind of informal meet and greets so I can actually start to get to meet my students. And that has helped with engagement. With not all 250 of them at any given moment come to a meet and greet, but a good number of them did. It kind of a surprising number, more so than if I'd probably had a meet and greet on campus. So, you know, they fill a room and we talk about course material and also what they're watching on Netflix and how they're kind of managing the pandemic. And that has helped me want to feel connected with them. And I know it helps them too, but even just to be purely selfish, it has helped me feel at least some semblance of connection with my students.
That's helpful. And I know I've heard in other contexts that Dabney Dixon has said that students are more likely to come to tutoring sessions as a group than one-on-one. And again, the sort of informal sense of community is really helpful. And I want to highlight, we're going to pivot to talk about asynchronous instruction in a second. One of the prompts for this session was that the dean was given some DFW rate information. And you guys, again, probably know this better than I do, but we had really high rates of DFs and Ws in lower division asynchronous online instruction. I'm seeing nodding heads here, and that all makes intuitive sense. So I'm going to go back to the panel and say, can you give us specific tips building on maybe what Mindy said for asynchronous instruction? And this time, Deirdre, I'll start with you, then go to Mindy, then go to Matthew.
Well, the first thing I'll say is that I've adopted what Mindy does, these meet and greet Zoom sessions, only a couple per semester, voluntary. We haven't done one yet, so I don't know how it will go, but just to give a little more of a personal connection. The other thing about asynchronous courses, they'll say, like I see this in my evaluations, they will say, I like asynchronous, go at your own pace with a hard end date, but I want more engagement. And so this semester, this is where the podcast comes in, and Mindy's idea of the meet and greet. And then the other thing I'd just say is be as helpful and as nice as you possibly can. I try to get back to students really quickly, and just to make sure that they because sometimes they really do get confused, even though you think that your class is like really clearly structured, and that stresses them out. But other than that, I mean, it's just kind of more, it's a real challenge, because if they're saying, well, we like asynchronous, we like going at our own pace and everything, but we want more engagement, you just have to be creative in different ways. Pack back is another good one, particularly as a professor. This is actually really important. You really have to get into the pack back discussions as well, to make it interactive. It can't just be the students interacting with each other. So it does take up some of your time. I try and get on there a couple days a week.
So Deirdre, let me do a follow-up with you, and I'll ask Mindy and Matthew to speak to this as well. All of that sounds great, and it also sounds like, how am I not going to go stressed myself offering that much support? How do I be helpful? How do I be responsive? And maybe, not give my cell phone number, and again, do this without burning myself out, because I know a lot of people are heading into this semester already feeling fried.
Yeah, well, okay. One thing I'd say, these are typically, the smallest online class I've had is probably 66 students. The Deviance class is always 100 or 120 or 150. That when I'm talking about giving my cell phone number out and getting back to students immediately, I'm talking about a percentage of the students that is not that large. A lot of the students that choose this sort of environment to take courses, they're choosing it because they want it. They're choosing it also because they've had experience with it. So in terms of time, in terms of me, going crazy, whatever, I'm not, because it's just one segment of the population of the student body that's contacting me a lot. And it typically is people who, especially since the pandemic, that just do not have the experience of being in these asynchronous online courses.
Yeah, I think that's true. I'm going to switch over to Mindy, but folks, keep an eye on the chat. We've got really good questions in the chat. I will make sure we circle back to them. I don't want to lose some of the questions that are coming in. So Mindy, asynchronous instruction without being available 24/7.
So I'll talk about a couple things. One is I found that anything I can do, and you all know this already, but anything you can do on the front end to make things so super clear and so organized and everything is linked in 1,000 places, that saves so much time when you have hundreds of students, and it leaves room for the more meaningful interaction, and you have more energy to have those kinds of emails, as opposed to, you know when you screw up because all of a sudden you get 200 emails, right? And we don't want those. So anything that I did on the front end has helped really save time, and also having had students having taken classes one semester now. I taught all first years last semester, and that was a lot of email. Now I'm teaching juniors and seniors who have done this before as well. And so I simply am not getting overrun in the way that I felt my first time out doing this. So that sort of setup and an automation of things like the reminders that would, all of that I set up in the beginning of the semester, so I have to kind of keep that in mind. Another thing I do in asynchronous instruction in order to, again, kind of keep them connected and engaged is when they do an assignment, we, along with my TA, we take the information and then we submit back out, weekly what they all had to say. So they're starting to get a sense. They're not just submitting assignments into the ether. They get a whole review about what everyone did and how everybody responded to the assignment of the week. And that does take more time, but I do think that is a way. It's something I would do in face-to-face, but I do think it is helping online for them to get a sense of what it is that they're all contributing, because they don't know each other, right? So they don't talk to one another, so they get that presentation. And then on the kind of the lighter end, in order to kind of create community, this is not wild or crazy, but I ask them, or unique, but I ask them to send me pictures of their pets when they first get on. And I get, if they don't have a pet, they might send me like, this possum lives in my backyard, or this is my little sister, I don't have a pet. And I get all these photographs, which are fun, but then I take each one, or not all of them, I take the best of them and I create little messages and pieces of advice for the class, so that it'll have like, this pet, Bruno says, remember to turn your blah blah in early. And so throughout the content, they get to see all the pet pictures and they look for their pet and they comment on each other's pets. And again, it's silly and has nothing to do with the course content, but it does seem to help build a little bit of community in the class.
That's great. I'm starting to think about what I would put there if it were me. So, okay, Matthew, ideas you have for asynchronous instruction?
Yeah, well, first of all, Mindy, that's adorable. This goes back before online. I used to put up a picture when I introduced myself to the class of my dog and said, this is my dog, Hazel. She's cuter than your dog, and we don't have to have any conversations about it. And so it always ends up with emails from students going, actually, my cat's cuter than your dog. And it starts off just a kind of nice communication. I hadn't carried that over into online, and I think I will now. So thank you for that. And so while, as Deirdre was talking about PackBack, I haven't used PackBack yet. I did do a little bit of research into it, but didn't adopt it this semester. But I have been using the discussion forums in iCollege. And while they don't have the AI, they do allow for some engagement. And I saw that Stephanie had asked a question about asking the students and encouraging them to communicate with each other. And I always remind my students that it's a discussion board, not a you post and then forget about it board. Right. And so I do require that as a part of their credit for each post, they have to respond. And there actually are some relatively straightforward ways of giving credit to students for having a post and a response without even necessarily requiring that you read every single one. But with that being said, to make it engaging, it really is important that you check in at least every once in a while with the discussion forum and comment and share some thoughts, if not on every post, on a few of them, so that the students know you're there, right? And that certainly is time consuming. Unfortunately, there's no secret way of getting around that. But it does help a lot with making a discussion forum not just feel like a box checking requirement for the students, because otherwise it feels like that. They're just like, well, it's busy work. It's due Friday at 5, so I'm going to log in Friday at 4:45 and I'm going to get mine done, and that's it. And so asking them to engage with each other, but also being there is really helpful. And there's one thought, I think it was Mindy that was talking about clarity, and we've all kind of touched on this, but I found it really helpful to, one, deactivate your course. There's a little checkbox hidden somewhere in there to deactivate your course so that it's not visible at the beginning of the semester, and then upload all of your stuff so students don't get flooded. I was talking to another colleague about this with a bunch of announcements when you put a whole bunch of stuff in there, and then have a colleague come and look at your course, either add them as an instructor or something so that they can check it out and tell you whether or not you're as clear as you think you're being. Because as I think we've all experienced when we write, we think we're being perfectly clear with what we're writing, and then somebody else looks at it and has no idea what we meant. It can be really helpful to have somebody kind of muck around in your course to make sure that it looks like what it would work for them if they were a student in the class. So I found that to be helpful. And it has avoided a couple of potential incidences early on in the semester for me. I still have other things come up. I mean, it happens, but that's been helpful. And the last thought that I wanted to share is very brief, but if you haven't experienced intelligent agents, this is the only time-saving example that I can really share with you. I know some of you may have seen them before and maybe they seem a little bit highly technical, but it's a really useful way of offloading some of the email communications that you might want to put in on a one-on-one basis to allow you to communicate with students that fit certain categories in your course. Say, for example, doing poorly on the first exam, or not engaging with material for a certain amount of time. It can be a really easy way of personalizing a communication to a lot of students at once based on certain categories. And so I have played around with them a little bit and found them to be really helpful in making it feel personal to a class that may be as much as 100 students. Each of them is getting a communication from you only if they meet certain characteristics, and they've been really helpful.
So my last question is going to build off on that, and then I'll open up conversation among everyone here, and that is around technology. I had not used iCollege extensively before last fall. I had a little bit, but not much. I went through the mastering, online teaching course through CETL, and I felt supported through iCollege. I used it, but I had a number of colleagues who got so overwhelmed by technology, it wasn't actually helpful. So I would just love to hear from each of you anything that you found, strategies you have for using iCollege or maybe some other technology helpfully instead of sort of the technology owning you. Matthew, I don't know if you want to start. I know you've thought a lot about this, and then I'll go to Deirdre and to Mindy.
Sure, happy to. I can say this, and I don't know if this is going to make people feel better or worse, but I sort of, before we started with the required to teach online, I had played around with iCollege a little bit. So I had kind of run into the kinds of problems that some people were running into when it felt really stressful. Before, it was still a little bit stressful, but not quite the same. So I had kind of experienced them a bit earlier and got my feet wet first. But I will say that there certainly are some tools that are helpful in iCollege without diving too deep into them. And one of the nice things that I've found that has been really helpful, at least for me, and I think for some of my colleagues in biology, is having opportunities to talk with each other about these tools and talk with each other about our experiences and then learn from each other so that it doesn't feel like you're trying to figure it out all by yourself. Right? Because Catherine, as you say, we sometimes get these tutorials or we get an offer to go take a training. And then at the end of the hour, you feel just as dizzy as you were at the beginning. You're just not quite sure how to use it, or can I allocate that hour? But, with a lot of these things, if you spend a few minutes with somebody else who maybe has the same experience as you, maybe a little bit more, you can talk through an idea, play around with it, and then it feels much less stressful to use it. The other bit of advice I'll give is try not to think about using all of them at once. Right? Pick one or two tools that seem like they're going to be helpful for you, whether it's intelligent agents or discussion boards or Packback, and just try those out. Don't try to dive into every single tool in one semester. It's just too much all at once.
That's helpful. Deirdre?
Yeah. my assistance with all of this is the help desk. My strategy here is if I'm trying to do something, like I had a problem with moving modules around in content, and I was doing it wrong, so it was moving it into another module. And instead of just spending tons and tons of time, because I couldn't find anything else in the help documents, I just emailed the help desk. So I don't pester them all the time, but if it's something that I just can't figure out, I email them. And a lot of times somebody calls me back. So there's also a lot of resources. There's video resources at Seedlow. For instance, there's one up now. If people are interested in using the iCollege whiteboard, there's a whole video that shows you how to do it. My second research help thing, if you call it, is Google. If you just put in Google, how do I do this in iCollege, there's somebody out there who's going to know. Yeah. And so, and that saves you time from, trying to just, because this is where you're going to get really frustrated and stressed is, when you think you screwed up all the content of your course, when all you're trying to do is reorder your module. And so don't hesitate to contact the help desk, because that's what they're there for. And, or don't hesitate to use Google.
That's great. Yeah, I know sometimes I hesitate to contact the help desk, but that's what they're there for, and they are incredibly helpful when they connect with me. Mindy.
Yeah, I had to have a ceremony when Zoe retired to just, be able to survive, Zoe we would just call on the cell phone. That was amazing. Anyway, I'm relatively, well, I'm not relatively new. I am super new to online instruction. And because I have so many students and because many of them are first year, my decision was to just keep it as bare bones as possible. So they didn't have to learn new technologies in all of their different courses. And I didn't have to deal with teaching them the different technologies on top of teaching them the content. So if I could keep it in iCollege, and I can keep it in iCollege, I have just simplified. And that's kind of how I survived the last 2 semesters, is by keeping it simple. I have folks all the time kind of selling me new ideas, and all I can think about is how much I'll have to teach the students in order to use it. So unless you're so into it or it's so necessary, I would just recommend keeping things pretty bare bones.
So I am going to open our conversation up to folks who've got questions or comments. I'm looking in the chat. We've got a lot of really experienced teachers in the virtual room right now who've got great ideas. While you're thinking about your questions, and feel free to either raise your hand in the chat or put the question in the chat, I just want to point out we all got an email from Seedlow this morning. And one of the things that they have at the bottom of the email, might have been hard to find it, is a whole list of upcoming teaching and learning webinars that might be useful. So when you have a minute, take a look at that. They have some very targeted conversations. So any questions or comments that people have to ask? If not, I can take us to some of the comments in the chat already.
William asked a question about Teams and Slack. I can speak to both of those a little bit. I loved Slack for my small class. I've never tried using it for a larger one. But Teams, I believe, has some problems because of the way that it's set up at Georgia State, with faculty firewalled away from students. And it makes it challenging.
Yeah. I also I'm looking for an exchange between, I can't remember who has, Stephanie, I think you had a question, and Teresa, I think you responded to it, about using discussion boards and involving people in discussion boards and a way to give them credit for it. Teresa, I don't know if you want to respond to that and tell everybody what you were thinking.
Yeah, so I've been working with Grace from PackBack, and I can send anyone her information. I don't know if Deirdre has been working with the same person, but we basically, certain weeks we have a content open-ended question, and then they have to answer each other's questions. And then other weeks we have research questions. that are based on primary literature. So we kind of flip back and forth, but they have to do 3 things every week in order to get. Another good thing about Packback is you can do they do curiosity points. So they try to do like, if you just write a question like, what is this? Like, that's not a very curious question. But if you say, I'm confused about this problem, blah, blah, blah. And then you can also donate sparks to people. So if they put something up there and it sparks your interest, then you can give them a spark. So that also helps their overall score.
Do you use that as sort of extra credit, or just it's part of the points in the class?
Yeah, I use it as a participation grade because I'm not meeting with my students in person. So it's kind of a way for them to participate regularly.
May I add something?
Yes, please.
Yes, so I'm actually thinking of William's question, and I don't know what he meant by Teams. Is that the Microsoft Teams or WebEx Teams? I tried Microsoft Teams, just like Matthew said, it's not set up for students, so I had to give up on that one. And then I started experimenting with the WebEx tools, and now, in October timeframe, they delivered a lot more features, and actually I was working with one of the IT person and kind of provided some of my feedback that these are the limitations I find, and I cannot utilize it for what I'm delivering through this new model I'm trying to roll out. And I'm thinking maybe they have heard it, or not necessarily just my request. I'm sure it was a request from a lot of people. So I started using extensively WebEx Teams, and I am so satisfied. I would recommend it to anyone any day. So WebEx Teams is actually the platform. I feel what was being discussed with, through discussion board, or, through Slack or anything like that. It is the exact same thing that is happening on my Teams portal. Students are connected. They are getting questions outside the class time, breakout sessions, and I do have synchronous breakout sessions and things like that. They don't now, limit their asking questions. They post it there. Peers, myself, my peer tutors, they all are answering. So it is being answered at a really, faster speed, and students are satisfied. They are showing, kind of a community feeling nowadays. So, especially the logistic questions, just like based on your syllabus, lots of questions come directly to you. But these are the things, once you start noticing something like that and post it there, that question is answered for all. So I am actually utilizing this team space as my, platform for communicating to hundreds of students. So it is a really good, satisfactory experiment on my side. So just wanted to share.
So Sitandra, let me build on that and ask our panelists. I'm also looking at Mark Grinchbaum's comment in the chat, which I really empathize with or resonate with, that there's so many tools out there that at a certain time, I just start feeling overwhelmed. I'm also feeling like it's the second week of the semester. I've got my syllabus in place. I've already started. Is it too late to make a change? Like, what could I do? Is there one thing that's out there that if you could only give a piece of advice, try this one thing, what would that be?
So yeah, that's a really good question. And I kind of kept it open on my syllabus when I was preparing that. The reason is, for my asynchronous class, I kind of required them to do some participation activities, which will count for their grades. So I kind of, gave them hints that these are the types of activities I might propose during the semester. But, it is, and then I have etc. So, please make sure you're reading my emails, because I might come up with some new ideas and you consider. So I actually have been delivering some tools which are kind of interactive type. One of them is learning catalytics, which is coming from our Pearson's product, which it is part of part of the, my lab math program. So it is absolutely free for students, and but it takes a lot of time and effort on your side. So as an advice, or recommendation, I would not say advice, but as a recommendation, I think once you start showing something which you can share the results from all the students without their names, that is a really good tool for them to see, why this answer is correct, why that triggers a question, kind of a topic that brings up discussion. So when the activity is over, I kind of share the results with them, and they get to see all students' results without the names, and that is actually a perfect, way of bringing their interest into that topic.
That's helpful. Mindy, I'm seeing you nod your head, and also you, Deirdre. Do you want to respond, Mindy? And then Deirdre and Matthew, I'll turn to you.
I don't have a great answer. So I'm nodding because I think what Sutandra is saying is interesting.
Deirdre, Matthew, and go from there. Okay, so I just want to be clear with what the question is. You've set everything up. You're in your second week of classes, and something's gone wrong. I mean.
No, I guess I'm just feeling like, we've all started the semester already, and now I'm sitting in a session and people have great ideas, and I'm feeling like, shoot, I wish I knew this, 2 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, and I was preparing the class. Is there one strategy you have to recommend that I could bring into my teaching right now that would improve the engagement of the students, would maybe reduce my sense of stress, something like that?
Well, I mean, if you're listening to this session, because I got the idea from Mindy, obviously I got it before the semester started, well, we're only 2 weeks in, but this meet and greet Zoom thing, I'm like, wow, that's actually a good idea. It's voluntary, etc. If I hadn't had that in my syllabus, what I would have done is I would have recorded a video announcement of me. Basically, or if it's a class with Tyler, with both of us, saying, we just got this really good idea. So it could be anything. It's not just the Zoom meet and greet. It could be something else. As long as you're not giving them like more work, meaning create their grade. And then you just say, hey, I was in this meeting and this seems like a great idea. So we're going to do 2 of them this semester. We'll give you more information in the next week or so once you settle in. These are voluntary, but look for them in announcements. So whatever it is, just something like that. So it's personalized. And they see you and they know where you got the idea from, and like, wow, it just seems like a really good idea. So that's how I would have done it if I hadn't already been in a meeting with actually the 3 of you, and Mindy had mentioned it before the semester started. That's how I would implement it if the semester had already started.
That's helpful. Matthew, any thoughts you have?
Sure. Well, I do love the idea of this kind of informal opportunity to connect with your students outside of class content. I think that again, is a way of, with relatively little time commitment, you can spend maybe an hour once a week, once every other week, once a month even, just connecting with them and letting them know that you're a person too, right? Especially now when between asynchronous and also even synchronous online classes, it feels like we don't get to know each other as people. Right? Those informal moments that happen right before class starts when everybody's just kind of sitting around setting up and getting ready just don't happen now. The same way our informal meetings with colleagues don't happen. I think that's a nice, relatively low stress way of continuing to build community in the class. But the other pitch, and I know I mentioned it already once, I found that those intelligent agents were really helpful for me as a way of helping me communicate with students. And in fact, I'm going to continue using them even for my non-online courses, because it helps me to communicate with students in a way that I couldn't otherwise. I have 100 students in one of my classes, and if 10 of them, I'm being optimistic, but let's say 10 of them fail a quiz, there wasn't another way for me to make sure that I just reached out to all 10 of them quickly and easily And intelligent agents, as much as it feels like there's a bit of a tech jump that you have to make to learn how to use them, really help with that. And it makes it so that instead of 10 individual emails that I'd have to seek out and then send, it automatically goes out. And then I can offer the students opportunities to come speak to me. They may not take me up on that offer, but at least they know that I'm there and I'm looking and I'm interested. Now, they don't have to know that the computer was looking and it sent out that email for me, but I took the time to craft it and it feels personal. And that really helps to get a lot of value out of a relatively little time commitment.
I feel like that's repeating a point that Mindy said earlier about front loading, that if you can put in some effort now, I know it's hard with everything going on, but it does seem to pay off later in the semester. So, I'm sorry, go ahead. No, go ahead, Mindy. Yeah.
I was just going to say, one of the things that we've talked about in terms of low time commitment, like when I do my meet and greets, I might do them every 2 weeks. It's not in the syllabus, so it's all kind of a bonus for them. But there can be other opportunities that you could use to do that sort of informal communication. So you could raise something on the discussion board that isn't about class, so that you don't have to even monitor it and take your time, but that the students can chit chat with each other about something, again, that's on a separate board that's kind of more fun. And I often find when I do something like that, I get all kinds of students that never would participate in an optional board about class content that are happy to at least jump in and chat with each other about whatever else I've asked them. So that might be an idea. I haven't done this before, but I can imagine if there's a movie I want to watch already and I intend to watch it, like maybe offering a Netflix party opportunity to my students so they can watch it with me, if it's at all linked to course content. So that could be something where, again, you're offering an opportunity to connect, but without taking any extra time than you would have already done it because you wanted to watch the film anyway. So I was just trying to think of, what can I do that's fun? I already give them a lot of content and I already give them challenging assignments. So, something that's, I don't do that face to face. I would not have a Netflix party with them, but I'm trying to kind of make up for what they're missing. And I think whether it's a trivia night, which I've never done, a Netflix party, like I think we could do something like that without having to change your syllabus.
You're getting big props for the Netflix party idea in the chat. People seem to like that. Yeah. So I want to open it up to more questions. There are a couple of you in particular, Olga and Robert Maxwell, chiming in with some ideas. I want to give you the opportunity to share if you have other suggestions. And I'm not seeing any other questions in the chat right now. So I don't know. Robert, you've mentioned a couple of articles and resources. I don't know if you're comfortable.
Yeah, Robert saying about specifications grading, and this is great
Yeah.
system, I think, for students. I just think it's tons of work. So I'm looking for someone else to try it. So maybe Robert can tell us what's his game plan, how many students, in what class.
Well, this is a senior graduate level biosafety class, and they're broken up into teams with undergraduate and graduate students, and they've always had a semester-long scaffolded project to build a laboratory biosafety manual. And I've always given them times to revise. There are other aspects of the class that, they either do or they don't do, and their grade's going to depend on how many times they come to a meeting, how many times they do or complete a perusal reading, because all of the materials for this class are government documents. So I just loaded them all up into perusal so that they can annotate them and read through them. So it just made sense this semester, and I gave the students a choice. I said, either we do everything where you get a letter grade, or we do this, and up front you'll know what it's going to take to get an A. And you either do it or you don't. And it works.
Less emotional work, that's for sure.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Hey, Robert, how do you assess, is it simply completion, or is there any kind of, I know on a higher level, you're going to have probably pretty good quality, but I'm thinking about for my first year students, the range and quality is just,
Yeah, I tried this once with a lower level class and it completely failed, and we went back very quickly to grades. It works for upper level, I think. Because what the idea behind specification is, I'm giving them incredibly detailed instructions on what they have to do. So from Steedle, you probably remember Tilt. All of the assignments are tilted. So they have even what I would do if I was about to do this project. You know, kind of a first-hand example of this is what you need to do. So they have very detailed expectations, and they either meet the expectations or they don't. If they don't, I'm going to give them a chance to revise. Because this is a professional class. You know, biosafety is a truly professional class. And if they go out, you know, they're going to go through if they get a job in biosafety, they're going to go through committee after committee trying to get things approved. And so it's just getting that idea of, yeah, you're going to write 20 standard operating procedures for this. You're going to write a biosafety manual. You're going to explain how you're designing this lab and go from there.
So Mindy, you've put in the chat tilt equals transparency / clear expectations. Do you want to say just a couple more words about that for those of us who aren't in that vocabulary world?
Yeah, that's actually there's the actual
from Matthew.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had not heard it called tilt until I took that mastering MOT, whatever, the MOT. And so I just always considered it just basic good pedagogy, that any time that you have an assignment, you are being super clear about what your expectations are, what you want them to get out of the assignment. So you're not just assigning, but you're explaining the purpose and the objective behind the assignment. It's a little less alienating for them to do an assignment when they understand what your intention is and then how you're going to assess it. So that's how it was a while ago. It was back in May that I took the class. So if anyone wants to correct me, that's fine. But I just kind of told myself, oh, that's just good pedagogy. So I don't know if we need an acronym for that, but.
Yeah. Well, I want to bring that back to Matthew and Deirdre too. We talked about this when we were preparing for this session, that, you know, we all want to be clear. We all want to be transparent. We all think we are. Matthew talked about this earlier, and then you found out you weren't. What are the ways that you check that you are being clear to your students? Are there ways that we can do that so we don't end up, as we all have at the end of a semester, thinking we were clear about an expectation, finding out we weren't? Do you have a recommendation on how we could do that now? Matthew, I'll start with you and then go to Deirdre.
Yeah, well, so, you know, it's going to be one of those practice what I say and not necessarily what I do, because I think that I could do a better job of that. Part of it is time consuming, right? And we've all been there. There's a deadline of when you wanted to post something for your students or give them an assignment, and it's coming and you have to just write it and then like post it. But ideally, having other eyes on it is really helpful. So it's something I try to do with like the entire course structure. And you know, at the beginning, before the semester starts, I get really enthusiastic about having everything up before the semester starts on iCollege. My entire semester will be there, but that's not realistic. I try it and I, you know, hit a wall pretty close to the semester beginning, and I realize it's not going to happen. But whatever I do have, I ask a colleague to come and look at it, or I add them. It's been really helpful. I've been part of one of the master course projects where multiple faculty are working together. And while that's not realistic for every course that we teach, to have an entire team building out a course, I have found it to be really helpful in regard to, I'm going to write something in my words and language, and you're going to write something in yours, and then we can look and compare and see what they sound like and feel like from each other's perspectives. But you can do the same thing with your own course, even if it's not a part of a group development project, of asking somebody to just put eyes on it. Because otherwise, how do you know if you're being clear until you get emails of that wasn't clear?
Yeah. Deirdre?
Well, you can also ask somebody at Seedlo to look at it, and they'll give you feedback. Or as Matt said, just have one of your colleagues look at it and see, you know, you think it's really clear. Well, okay. If you have a college student as a kid, have them look at it. Yeah, Mindy's smiling. If you don't have a college student, have it, and you've got a spouse, have your spouse look at it. And you know, just have somebody else look at it so you've got another perspective. I mean, when I was taught back when I was learning how to teach online in 2017. I was lucky enough to have Zoe train me, who I think retired. It just, the message of keep it simple and clear, and keep every module has the same components but different material, those sorts of things. And the thing that kind of blew me away was I was expecting that I was going to be putting up, 40-minute PowerPoints or lectures or whatever. And she's like, oh no, keep it to 15 minutes. So in that, this goes across assignments and everything. Keep them relatively short and clear. And the same thing with the reading. Make it so what I've done is they have the same amount of reading every week, and I can tell them up front, this is how much you're going to be reading every week. And I think one of the problems that happened last semester was that because professors weren't teaching face-to-face and were teaching online or in a hybrid format for the first time, they felt they had to give students lots of assignments and lots of readings, and more than they did when they were teaching face-to-face. And that really stressful. I mean, the professors were already stressed out, but that also stressed out the students. So anyway, that's what I would say.
Yeah, I agree. I'm looking at the chat. Therese mentioned the idea of students liking rubrics, and there's been agreement on that. And I think in many ways it's because of what you're all saying. You want to be clear. You want to be consistent. Often less is more. And students just want to know we all, like, and Bill has said this, we all want to know what's expected of us and not have the goalposts moving. So Tundra, you looked like you had some thoughts to chime in and I cut you off.
Yeah, so I actually wanted to share something that works really well for my asynchronous class and synchronous class. That is the survey. I offer from time to time, and I do not want to make it like an expected thing for every session or every week or something like that. But from time to time, when I deliver some short surveys, and I share the results, they really like it, even if it's a simple question, like at the very beginning when I'm asking, on the very first time I'm asking, what is your comfort level for math? I give some choices which are very interesting ones, and they share their responses. And so for the first time, when I'm delivering these types of things, and then I start opening up, what would you like to see something from my online class, where I do not get a chance to interact with you directly other than email and the team space, and kind of I start getting some feedbacks on that one. So this is my recommendation. If you get a chance, and which is absolutely available through Qualtrics, that is a really good place. Once you build, it will be there for you to next time use it. Or it can be on, on WebEx. Now they have included that whole thing, the survey question, so you can actually build it. So I think it is very useful tool, and then students get to see, 60% students are actually struggling with this topic, so maybe it's something I want to address during my. So even after my short session in 50-minute, lecture class, I want to find out, are you comfortable with this, what you learned last week? Maybe we should revise that in our breakout session or something. So it all depends on how I'm presenting, but I do not give them a set expectation that every time they have to do surveys. So it's kind of brings in a little bit of dynamics in the classroom, so which I think students are enjoying. So just wanted to share.
Yeah. You got a big thumbs up from Matthew for that. And I'm seeing discussion in the chat that Robert uses them at the end of modules. I think, Matthew, you said that iCollege surveys work as well. And you can build it just like you build a quiz, I guess, in iCollege. I haven't tried that. So yeah, that's terrific. Yeah. Well, so for my last question, I just want to ask, is there, and I'll start with the panelists, but open this up to everybody else also. What's sort of the biggest lesson you learned about teaching last semester online that you're bringing with you into your teaching this semester? Like, what's the thing that you're carrying forward from last semester's teaching to this semester? And in case you can't tell by their puzzled faces, I did not let them know this question was coming. So I don't know who wants to chime in first on that.
I'll go.
Okay.
So what I found that worked well last semester that I'm doing again this semester is, again, an effort to be super clear. And I do that in a couple ways, but in terms of scheduling, I have set and this is something that would be hard to change now, unfortunately, if you've already set your syllabus up, but I try to create a very, very strong rhythm in the class. So that things are always due at the same time. They know at the end of each week, this is going to be due. It looks the same the next week. It looks the same the week after that. So that once they figure out the pattern and the feel of the class, it's pretty easy for them to not overwhelm me with asking me the same questions, or new questions. I also repeat patterns of assignments so that I'm not starting off with 7 different types of assignments and then they have to learn instructions for all of them. So I find, 1 or 2 assignments and then repeat them throughout the course, hoping that they can, instead of learning how to do the assignment, they're learning the content that they're working with in the assignment. So that's kind of, I think, what I would, what worked for me and what I will continue to do is really focus on that sort of continuity in the scheduling. That's worked.
Great. Deirdre?
One thing that, and this is not just last semester, because remember, I've been teaching fully online now for a couple of years. So the change and the stress that a lot of professors experienced when we had to pivot and everything, I didn't really have to experience that because I was already online. It was more kind of the only thing I had to really deal with, which was different last semester, is the students who had never been online before. And so one of the things I did, because they wouldn't even know how to use iCollege, and I'm not a very good designer, but I designed this sort of in PowerPoint, a kind of like diagram with a screenshot of iCollege with little kind of, this is where you go for this is where you go for that kind of thing. I mean, so at least and that appeared to be very helpful. So I kept that. The other thing, though, that, and maybe students are just thinking about this more during the pandemic. One of the things that just came to me is that students in their various levels might want some sort of assignment that they could put on their resume. So, for example, with the COVID and systemic racism course, we found a free, the John Hopkins one isn't free anymore, but we found another free contact tracing class that the students take. It's 3.5 hours, so they take it and then they get some kind of badge, and then they can put on their resume that they've taken this contact tracing course. So, because people are still looking for contact tracers. Now, this is during the pandemic. I'm going to have to come up with other ideas that are not pandemic related once we get through this. But there's so many online things now where you can print out a certificate. If you can make it relevant to the class and something that would be attractive for them to put on their syllabus, meaning they're getting some kind of real experience out of it. That's something that I'm doing this semester and will try and do in all my online courses from now on.
That's helpful. Matthew.
Yeah, so first of all, of course, I agree with both Mindy and Deirdre that simplicity and also trying to think about ways of engaging with your students where they are I was actually just messaging with another colleague about this, but this past semester and over the summer even, Stephanie Gutzler and I worked with a grad student, and we built a little module of videos and instructional tools that we put into iCollege that were there for the students to be able to figure out how to use certain tools. And I know that CETLO developed something similar later on, and we kind of have a little bit of overlap. There are some things that I think were specific to how biology operates a bit, but for the most part, they're very similar. But a lot of us assume that our students are of a certain demographic, of a certain age, are more tech savvy than we are, and they're not. And a lot of them don't know how to use a lot of features in iCollege. And so what was really helpful, and I actually literally copied and pasted this entire module from a previous semester into my current one, is this little module that is how to subscribe to the calendar, how to get announcements to your email, things that some of us learned in the MOT that the students never got. They don't know how to do. And so explicitly directing them to that has been really helpful. I mean, I literally have students who go, "Oh, I didn't know how to do that. Thank you," in meetings because they simply didn't know it was an option. And so when you think that they're getting your communications, they may not be, but not because they're not looking. They don't know where to look, and they don't know how to find their way around iCollege. So in addition to that, I also have created little walkthroughs of the course, just a screen capture of our iCollege course page and showing them where to find things, sort of like Deirdre's map, but a video of me talking over it. Here's where the syllabus is, here's where the assignments will be, and so on and so forth. And I post that as a how to get around in the course. And so it's its own explicit little video, and that's been helpful as well.
I think that's really helpful. I know that I found my students, they're much more social media savvy than I am, but not necessarily iCollege savvy. And recognizing the difference was really, it was also very freeing for me. So, so I'm seeing that folks have to take off. They've got their next meeting. I will hang around for a few minutes, and anyone else who wants to keep sharing ideas. I do want to thank Deirdre, Matthew, and Mindy for contributing to this session. This was, of course, extra on top of everything else that they had to do at a very last-minute pace, and I really appreciate that. I want to remind folks about CETLO. They've got tons of resources there. My office as well. If you're looking for any help, contact me at the Faculty Affairs office. Just kamaclimate@gsu.edu. We'll get you to the right person for support. And then the final thing I want to remind everybody about is take a look at this week's Faculty Affairs Digest. Next week, we have a research reboot week. If you are looking to reboot your research because it's just been rough the last few months, we've got a whole bunch of workshops, one-on-one advising, book proposal review, NSF grant proposal review, and a session on including undergraduates in your research, whether it's in your research with you or them being the subjects of your research. Strategies for that with our own Mindy Stombler involved in that session as well. I also want to say, I don't think I said this at the beginning, both Deirdre and Matthew have been involved in supporting online instruction this past semester as online ambassadors for the college, and we really could not do what we have done without them. So I appreciate that effort as well. Right. Thank you, everyone. And we have recorded this. As soon as I can, I'll let you know when it's available to distribute. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.